Hi, this is Dr. Richard Ruling, here to welcome you to the Total Health Channel. Thank you for being with us from time to time. Please bow your hearts as I bow my head in prayer, asking God's blessing on this. Heavenly Father, thank you for life in the last days. Thank you for your word to us and promise, light and truth, and how to live well. Please help our understanding so that we can be ready for you with what's coming. And thank you for your promises exceeding abundantly for Christ's sake. Hallelujah. Well, in the Bible it says that God won't do anything without revealing it in Acts 3:7. And the next verse is about a lion's roar, and Christ is the Lion of Judah in Revelation 5:5. He's going to roar. Why? Because Muslims take the city of Jerusalem. That's in Zechariah. That's next to the last book of the Old Testament, just before Malachi and Matthew. Zechariah 14th chapter is the last one, and it says, "The day of the Lord comes, and nations will be gathered against Jerusalem to battle. Houses will be rifled, women raped, half the city goes into captivity, and then the Lord will go forth to fight against them." So that's an interesting scenario that's a heads up to us when we see it. And I believe that it's going to be next spring for multiple reasons, timelines that we can talk about toward the end of this. But I want to finish out, round out the picture, because Muslims are seen in, when Christ was asked about the end of the world in Matthew 24, he said to read and understand the book of Daniel. And in Daniel 8th chapter, there's a vision at the time of the end that Millerites, followers of a Baptist pastor in 1844, thought was going to be the end of the world. They misunderstood the vision at the time of the end as being 1844, but the vision is really the Kazon conflict of ram and goat. It's sort of a political cartoon where a goat flies from the west and smacks a Muslim ram, stomps on it, breaks its horns. The horns are said to be the kings of Media and Persia. Well, those countries are now Iraq and Iran, and we have done Iraq. Okay, Saddam is gone. So we are living at the time of the end, as it says in Daniel 8:17, and we should wonder what makes us, the goat, angry to fight the ram. We don't want war with Iran, but it's the Zechariah gives us the information that when Jerusalem is conquered, taken, and they take the city into captivity, half of it, and it will make the goat flying from the west angry to do so. And I can conceive easily that since Muslims have a mosque in Jerusalem with an inscription, "Allah has no son," I can easily imagine them celebrating that fact when suddenly the Lord will roar from Jerusalem, the heavens and earth will shake, and they will flee, as it says in verse 5 of Zechariah 14. Well, I think that's the big picture, and the question is, why haven't we seen that earthquake before? Well, it's encoded different ways in the book of Revelation. It is encoded as a lion's roar in Revelation 6:1, and when John heard thunder, it was one of the four beasts, but the first beast is a lion, okay, in that chapter. And when John hears thunder, that's the roar of the lion. Revelation 10:3 also has a mighty angel come down and crying as a lion roars. Okay, so there's again the earthquake, in my opinion, because when they take the city and they celebrate their mosque, the Lord will roar from Jerusalem, heavens and earth will shake, big earthquake. It's the day of the Lord, and when we find the day of the Lord in Isaiah 2:12 and 21, God is going to shake terribly the earth. Well, that's one big earthquake, and I believe it will usher in the end times with huge loss of lives and people who may not be ready or may be ready, depending on circumstances. And we need to give a warning for that, help to warn people and to be watching, because watching is protective. In Egypt, Israelites watched. They prayed the night before that God would pass over them. Passover was to pass, judgment was falling, but please pass over me, type of thing. And we understand that he did for the Israelites that were watching. They put blood on the doorpost. Christ put blood on the cross. If we understand him as doing that for us, we can pray that he will spare us. Well, that's just it in a nutshell, but that earthquake is also the knock for Laodicea. The only other place where Christ, in the wedding parable of Luke 12:36, that we're supposed to be ready when Christ knocks, the only other place he knocks is Revelation 3:20, and that church ended in an earthquake. So we should consider the knock as not just always gentle Jesus knocking at our heart's door, but also how things end. It ended in an earthquake for a lukewarm church, materialistic, focused on its things with Christ outside knocking. So I think we need to see that. And when the wedding parable of Luke 12:36 says, "Be ready when I come and knock, that you open immediately." How do we open? Okay, well, the next verse shows a wedding feast that's like the Last Supper. It's blessed are those servants whom his Lord finds watching when he comes. He will gird, they will gird themselves, and he will gird himself, make them sit down to eat and serve them. And if we do that, we will be blessed. Okay, but that imagery is Last Supper, and that was on the eve of Passover, and also Passover was the only night in the year that it was required to watch. Okay, so that all fits together. And I believe that the Muslims will take the city at Passover, and we can be protected by watching. First of all, let me just say this, that there are really two events separated. They will take the city at Passover like Titus did in 70 AD. But I think that the clues for when it starts is as the days of Noah, and then shall two be in the field. Days of Noah was second Passover. It was a 9/11 event. It was clued to us by Numbers 9, verse 10 and 11, for a late Passover for two reasons, really. If you have contact with a dead body and are unclean, you keep Passover the second month. And Noah was unclean by reason of a dead body. He buried Methuselah, his grandfather, who died as a sign the flood would come that year. And the second Passover is when actually the flood started. And I believe that second Passover for us will be huge next year, 2023. When Muslims take the city at first Passover, I believe he will roar and they will flee at second Passover. The wedding parables also in Matthew 25. 5 virgins missed the wedding. They didn't know when it was going to be or where. But Christ said, watch, you don't understand. It's like a man traveling to a far country. That's the other provision in 9/11. Numbers 9, verse 10 and 11, provided for Passover a month later for long journeys. If the Israelites took a trip in the springtime and couldn't get back for Passover, they were to keep it the second month. Because Passover symbolized judgment, and nobody escapes judgment. We all have to do it. So it will come. And this is how basically I believe the scenario will unfold with Muslims first. And so if we see that in springtime, that's also 1 Samuel 11:1 or 2, that at the end of the year when the kings go forth to battle, David was there in Jerusalem. But it tells you that kings go forth to battle at the end of the year. The year ends in winter, and spring begins the new year. God told Moses, this is the beginning of the month, the first month of the year to you, in Exodus 12, verse 2. And he was talking about the new moon as the beginning. But and we should understand that as the beginning of the year, and that's when God unfolded more of what's happening. Well, I'm seeing that 2015 was like that, because at the beginning of that year in the spring, half a dozen events happened as when-then signs occurred. The first one was a rare solar eclipse on the equinox, followed by a blood moon on Passover 2 weeks later. And Joel 2:31 says the sun will be darkened. That was the eclipse of the sun. Moon turned to blood before the day of the Lord. Well, before the day of the Lord, the word is panim, means face or facing the day of the Lord. And so they're coming soon. But that was 2015. And with the signs of Christ, let's just enumerate them. Sun darkened, moon turned to blood. When they say peace and safety, that's the Iran nuclear deal. But the peace and safety was 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 2 and 3. And Christ said, when you see an abomination standing where it ought not. Most Christians would agree that the Supreme Court new definition of marriage in 2015 was an abomination if they consider Leviticus 18, verse 22. And the Pope represents a system, a mother of abominations in Revelation 17:5, so that all these signs were significant. There was another one really. Early believers understood that the abomination represented the Roman army, and they fled the city when they saw the Roman army and were spared the siege by Titus. And but Rome came to Congress really, and he was in a sense standing where he ought not, because America doesn't believe in religious laws. It believes in separation of church and state. Pope was there to appeal for his book Laudato Si encyclical, which is about Sunday and get the blessings of the Eucharist, and a preference for Sunday to stop work and make church attendance easier for family. That's really ostensibly the main reason they're pushing for, but it's really also religious. So bottom line is that the Pope and all the events, one more that I should tell you about, and that is the San Andreas movie was released in 2015. I believe it's an omen or sign for the end times that will begin. And all those signs I'm seeing are a 7-year warning, like Joseph gave to Egypt when he said there would be 7 years of plenty and then 7 of famine. We've had the years of plenty up till now, from 15 through 22. We've had plenty to eat. But I believe that bad times are coming in 23, and you'll see it if you see the Muslims taking the city in at the end of March or April. So that's it in a nutshell. And then second Passover will be in May. And if we see, there's one more sign that's confirmatory in my opinion. I saw a video a few weeks back on a tsunami in Indonesia after an earthquake which wiped out or killed about 300,000 people on the lowlands and beach, but animals that were not tied down or chained or in a room somewhere in a house, they ran to higher ground and were spared. They somehow sensed that it was coming before it got there. And as the days of Noah, animals went into the ark. I would not be surprised if May 1 next year brings strange behavior from animals who want to get out of Los Angeles, and because I think that movie will be more like the San Andreas than we might imagine right now. We will see, but I just say heads up, and watch and pray on the eve of second Passover would be Friday night, May 5. And if we watch and pray, I believe we can be spared big stuff. If there is an earthquake that night, I believe that we open to Christ with a feast of unleavened bread, because that's also the feast, the wedding feast at Passover at that time. In the Bible, they had Passover as 7 days of unleavened bread. Weddings were also 7 days. Laban said, fulfill Leah's week in Genesis 29, verse 27. So the biblical weddings lasted a week, and the 7 days of unleavened bread coincide. In a sense, we marry Christ. Marriage is union by covenant, and communion is union based on the word. The body and the blood of Christ with the crackers and the wine represent also Christ and the word. He was the word. So they are similar. We reach union with him through communion and also by covenant. And so that's how. And the idea I'm seeing is that when God took Israel to Sinai for the covenant, he got an ignorant bride. They said, yeah, we'll do it. But 40 days later, they worshipped a calf, And that must not happen to Christ. And I see in the wedding parables embedded a provision that it not happen, because the wedding feast is unleavened bread. Christ said, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, meaning their teachings, their doctrines. And he wants Elijah, he said in Matthew, the previous statement about beware the leaven is Matthew 16th chapter, verse 12. But the next chapter, 17, verse 11, Elijah comes to restore all things. And we can be the Elijahs if we know the things that need to be restored, and we make our covenant based on those things. We see in Malachi 4, 4, and 5, remember the law of Moses with the statutes and judgments. Behold, I send you Elijah. So Elijah clearly is going to stand for Moses' law, statutes, judgments. And in Ezekiel 20, verse 11 to 24, those statutes and judgments have a sevenfold emphasis, where they're linked to Sabbaths. Okay, so you're reading it, statutes, judgments, Sabbaths, statutes, judgments, Sabbaths. And so those are topics that need to be restored, and other topics as well. I'll give you just an example. I've done this before, but God's name is found 7 times in the 10 Commandments, where you see Lord in all caps. Actually, Lord is not the name. I grew up thinking Lord is the name of God and God is the name of Lord, but those are titles. Translators did a bad thing to rip God's name right out of the Scripture and replace it with Lord as a generic title. They thought that would make God more acceptable, because the name is sort of an odd name. But you wouldn't want God to have a name like Tom, Dick, or Harry. You want it different, okay? And it is. Josephus said it was all vowels, okay? He was contemporary of the apostles in 70 AD when he was describing the temple furniture that they were bringing out after the destruction. And the golden crown in which was engraven the sacred name, it consists of 4 vowels. Vowels are the music and melody of a word, and if you only had the consonants b, d, m, k, p, we would be very limited in what we could say. But with the vowels, there's beauty. When you hear a beautiful song, you're hearing the vowel. And there's no obstruction to vowels like b. The consonants are obstructions. God has his characters like his name, no obstructions. And we'll discuss what the name is later, but I just wanted to illustrate the fact that we need to understand who he is. The bride must take the groom's name, and Christ said, I'm come in my Father's name. We need to know it. So that's just it in a nutshell, and I want to suggest to you that I have a book, Megaquake 2023, with the timelines, how 3 timelines and 7 events point to or signal apocalyptic times next spring. And I believe from lockdown to knockdown, another title that I have is because America has done a lot of stupid stuff, and if you don't think so, look around. They're taking our freedoms from the Constitution, and when Biden paid $1 billion to promote you-know-what, the media doesn't even warn us about bad events or reactions to it, and lots of people are dying. I think America is falling, and the earthquake and 7 seals will seal that event too. I think this is a book with the 7 topics that we need for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It becomes our covenant with God. When Christ said, have your loins girded and your lights burning, the loins girded is a clue for Passover, because they had their loins girded in Exodus 12, verse 11. But have your lights burning, that was like the covenant that God made with Abraham. When God was proactive, he wanted the covenant. He promised Abraham 7 times, I'm going to give you this land, I'm going to give you this land. And the land was for his seed, okay? And the covenant, God was proactive, as I'm saying, but when Christ said, you have your lights burning, God, let me just say this, that in Bible times when they made a covenant, they divided a sacrifice, and the 2 parties went between the sacrifice, as if to say, may I be torn apart like this sacrifice if I don't keep my part of the bargain. Well, when they He's wanting us to be proactive, and He wants us to, as God went between the burning as a burning lamp, we're supposed to be as a burning lamp and have the responsibility for making the covenant. So we can do that as the people did in Nehemiah's day. When they came back from Persia, they read the law, the book of the law, and signed and made a covenant to God to do it in Nehemiah 9 verse 38, and they signed to it. And I think we can do that too if we know the topics like God's name, the covenant, the statutes, judgments, the Sabbaths, and so on. I'm going to leave it to you to discover, but I'd say go to Amazon and type in my name, Richard Ruhling, R-U-H-L-I-N-G, under the book section, and you can see the books, and they will help you to get prepared and be ready. If we are ready for His knock, so that we can open immediately with the Feast of Unleavened Bread at second Passover, that's May 5 is when it starts. You might share communion that evening in readiness and pray, and if there's a huge earthquake, you'll want to keep 7 days of unleavened bread with the 7 topics. Focus each day on one topic, and I will try to make it available. The first one that I have really online is God's Name First Seal .wordpress.com, and at the bottom of that discussion of God's name there's a link to the second one, and so on. But I think it's nicer to have a book so you have it available and can read it. God bless you, and thank you for considering this. If you have questions, post them below. I'm going to post some information on this below anyway in the description, and hope you can find the website and other things there. God bless you. Thank you for being with us.